I didn't say a word when they laughed at me. Not one. I just sat there, holding my glass, while he smiled like he had just said something clever. Unemployed, he called me. Like I was nothing. Like I was behind. Like I didn't belong at that table. And the worst part? No one defended me. Not my parents. Not even my sister. But here's what nobody noticed in that moment: I wasn't hurt the way they thought I was. I was alert. Because when someone tries that hard to look successful, they usually have something to hide. And that night, he gave me just enough to start pulling the thread. I didn't argue. I didn't react. I just let them believe they had already won. So if you've ever been judged, underestimated, or made to feel small in a room full of people who should have had your back, stay with me. Because this story isn't about proving them wrong out loud. It's about doing it in a way they'll never forget. And I want to ask you something simple: have you ever been silenced in a moment where you deserve to be heard? If you have, just comment "silent" below. That's it. One word. And if you believe that the quietest person in the room is sometimes the most dangerous one, leave a like and subscribe. Because what I did next wasn't loud. But it destroyed everything he built. My name is Maya Collins, and in my family, I learned early what it meant to be invisible. Not the kind of invisible where people ignore you completely, but the kind where they look at you and decide you don't matter. At 26, I lived alone in a small apartment on the edge of the city. No fancy furniture, no framed achievements on the walls, just a desk, 2 monitors, and stacks of notebooks filled with numbers, patterns, and quiet observations. My work didn't come with titles or business cards. I analyzed companies, broke down financial behaviors, and solved problems people didn't even realize they had yet. Most of it was freelance, discreet, and intentionally low profile. I liked it that way. Because growing up in my family taught me something important: visibility came with judgment. My parents valued appearance over substance. My sister, Sophie, mastered that game perfectly: charming, polished, always surrounded by people who admired her life. And me? I was the contrast. The one they pointed to when they wanted to feel better about their expectations. Still figuring things out, they'd say about me. Like I was a project that never quite worked. What they never asked was why I stayed quiet. Why I never defended myself. Why I let them believe I had nothing going on. Because the truth was simple. I wasn't lost. I was watching. And the more I watched, the more I realized the people who needed validation the most were usually the ones hiding something. I just didn't know yet how close that truth was to home. I met Ethan Brooks the same way everyone else did, through my sister's voice, filled with admiration. He's different, Sophie said the first time she mentioned him. Ambitious. Driven. Successful. Those were the words she used. The same words my parents repeated days later, as if they had already decided who he was without ever meeting him. By the time I finally saw him in person, he had already been approved. Ethan had that kind of presence that filled a room without effort. Confident posture, easy smile, the kind of eye contact that made people feel chosen. He spoke in calm, controlled tones, dropping just enough details about his business to sound impressive, but never enough to be questioned. Something about that balance felt intentional. I run a private investment firm, he told my father over dinner. Mostly high-level clients. Discreet operations. My father nodded, visibly impressed. My mother smiled like Sophie had won something valuable. And me? I noticed what he didn't say. No company name. No clear structure. No specifics anyone could verify. Just enough vagueness wrapped in confidence. Then his eyes shifted to me. And you? He asked, with a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. What do you do, Maya? The table went quiet. Not out of curiosity, but expectation. Like they were waiting for me to prove what they already believed. I gave a small shrug. Nothing impressive. He smiled wider. And in that moment, I realized something subtle but dangerous. He didn't just want to be admired. He needed someone beneath him. The first time he diminished me, it was almost invisible. A small comment. Light tone. Perfect timing. We were all sitting around the table again, my parents, Sophie, Ethan, and me. Dinner had just ended, and the conversation shifted to careers, success, future plans, the usual territory where I was expected to disappear. Ethan leaned back in his chair, swirling his drink like he owned the moment. "You know," he said casually, "not everyone is built for high-pressure environments. Some people just prefer to take their time." He didn't look at me when he said it. He didn't have to. My mother chuckled softly. My father nodded like it made perfect sense. "And Sophie?" She smiled, but didn't say a word. I felt it, that quiet shift in the room where everyone silently agreed on who I was. Slower. Less capable. Behind. I could have corrected him. Explained what I actually did. Shut it down right there. But I didn't. Because something about the way he said it felt practiced. Measured. Like he had already studied the room and knew exactly how far he could go without being questioned. So instead of reacting, I watched him. The way his confidence depended on agreement. The way he waited just a second too long for validation after speaking. And then I noticed something else. When my father asked him a simple follow-up question about his firm, Ethan hesitated. Just for a second. Barely noticeable. But to me, it wasn't nothing. It was the first crack. And once you see a crack like that, you start wondering how deep it really goes. The night everything shifted didn't feel dramatic at first. It felt familiar. Same dining table. Same forced warmth. Same quiet expectation that I would play my role. Invisible. Harmless. Less. Dinner was louder than usual. My parents were in a good mood, Sophie was glowing, and Ethan, he was performing. Telling stories, making everyone laugh, controlling the rhythm of the room like it belonged to him. And then, somewhere between dessert and coffee, he looked at me. Not directly. Just enough. "So Maya," he said lightly, "you're still between things, right?" The pause before between was intentional. Carefully placed. I felt every eye turn toward me. I could have answered differently. Could have said what I actually did. Could have shifted the narrative. But I already knew how this worked. So I gave a small nod. Something like that. And that's when he smiled. "Must be nice," he added, chuckling. "No stress, no deadlines, basically unemployed, right?" The word landed exactly how he wanted it to. Unemployed. Simple. Dismissive. Final. My father laughed first. Then my mother. And Sophie, she tried to hide it, but she laughed too. For a moment, it felt like the room got smaller. Like everything about me had just been reduced to a joke everyone agreed on. But I didn't react. Because while they were laughing, I was listening. Really listening. And in the middle of his next sentence, something about client portfolios and international transfers, he said something that didn't just sound wrong. It was impossible. And just like that, the laughter stopped matching. Because now, I wasn't the one being exposed. He was. The room was still buzzing from laughter when I noticed it, a detail that no one else saw. Ethan was talking about a major client acquisition in Europe, and he casually mentioned numbers and processes that didn't add up. Wait, I thought, leaning back slightly, pretending to sip my wine. No company could handle that scale like he described. Not without a team. Not without licenses. Not without, I stopped myself. He was smiling, confident, unshakable. Everyone still believed him. My family had already chosen their version of reality. My father nodded as if impressed. My mother smiled, approving of her daughter's choice. Sophie giggled at some imaginary charm only she could see. And me? I felt the sting of truth pressing quietly under the surface. He wasn't what he claimed. Not even close. It would have been easy to react, to call him out, to shatter the illusion right there. But I didn't. Because I understood something crucial, exposing him in anger would only make me seem small. Emotional. Weak. Instead, I let him talk. Let him parade his lies. Let my family continue to believe the story they wanted. And I started to plan. Every inconsistency, every exaggeration, every tiny misstep he made. I stored them like pieces of a puzzle. That night, they laughed at me as unemployed. But I left the table knowing something they didn't. I had the first piece of the puzzle, and soon, the picture would be terrifyingly clear. After that dinner, I didn't speak about Ethan. Not to Sophie, not to my parents, not even to my closest friends. They believed I was weak. They believed I was defeated. They believed I had nothing. And for a while, I let them. I spent nights alone in my apartment, analyzing everything he'd said, every small slip, every inconsistency. The more I dug, the clearer it became, this wasn't just arrogance. This was a performance. A carefully crafted illusion to manipulate everyone around him. And my family? They were complicit. Their laughter, their nods, their blind trust, it wasn't just ignorance. It was validation. They fed him, gave him credibility, while treating me like I didn't exist. The isolation hit me harder than I expected. It was more than humiliation, it was betrayal. Every laugh felt like a knife. Every approving glance they gave him reminded me that I had no allies in the room I should have felt safest. I cried that night, quietly, letting the emotions I had been bottling up finally surface. But in between the sobs, a strange calm settled over me. I realized something: anger could destroy me, or I could use it. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to beg for respect. I just needed to be patient. Because silence has its own power. And I decided that I would wait. Wait, watch, and plan. They thought I was defeated. They had no idea the storm had just begun. I could have confronted him that night. I could have stood up at the next family gathering and exposed every lie, every exaggeration. My heart screamed for it. My mind imagined the satisfaction of watching him falter, seeing the smug smile replaced with panic. But I didn't. Because I understood something my family would never see: immediate reactions are easy to dismiss. Emotional outbursts are entertainment. And showing anger would only feed his power, make me the predictable one. So I made a choice. A quiet, deliberate choice. I would not fight him in the open. I would not argue. I would not beg for anyone to see the truth. Instead, I would observe. I would document. I would plan. I reached out to Jordan, an old colleague who understood numbers and patterns like I did. Someone meticulous, discreet, reliable. Together, we began to track details Ethan thought were invisible: transactions, inconsistencies in his stories, vague company references. Every small slip, every exaggeration, every contradiction became a thread. It was painstaking, invisible work. Hours spent analyzing, comparing, connecting dots that no one else noticed. And the more we uncovered, the more I felt a calm power rising inside me. While everyone else laughed, I was building a map, a strategy that didn't rely on luck, chance, or confrontation. I wasn't the one being humiliated anymore. I was the one preparing to make them all see what had been hiding in plain sight. And the best part? They would never know it came from me until it was too late. From the outside, Ethan seemed untouchable. Every family event, every dinner, every casual conversation, he thrived. His confidence was magnetic, his charm effortless. My parents praised him, Sophie adored him, and anyone observing would think he had already won. He strutted through life as if every room belonged to him. Every joke, every subtle jab at me, reinforced his position. Unemployed, he had called me once, and the word still echoed in my mind, but now it fueled me rather than hurt me. I watched him carefully, noting not just his words but his patterns. How he smiled when people agreed with him. How he paused slightly when details required scrutiny. How he relied on assumptions, on others' willingness to believe appearances. It would have been easy to rush, to expose him impulsively. But strategy demanded patience. Every slip he made, every inconsistency in his stories, was ammunition. And from the way he carried himself, I could see he believed his own lies completely. Inside, I felt a calm clarity. While the world saw a confident man conquering life, I saw cracks, tiny, almost invisible, but undeniable to anyone paying attention. Ethan thought he was untouchable. And for now, he was. But untouchable is just another word for predictable. And I was learning exactly how to turn predictability into downfall. I became a shadow in plain sight. At family gatherings, I laughed when expected, nodded when prompted, and let Ethan take center stage. But my mind never rested. Every word he said, every story he told, I recorded mentally. Every success he flaunted, every anecdote about clients and investments, I cross-checked in the background. I began noticing patterns. He repeated phrases, recycled names, cited companies that didn't exist, or at least, didn't exist the way he claimed. He relied on charm to fill gaps, on the family's assumptions to cover the cracks. The more I observed, the more the illusion faltered, like a wall with tiny fractures slowly spreading. Even Sophie, blinded by admiration, gave subtle clues. Hesitations, almost imperceptible when he spoke about money or business, a fleeting doubt in her eyes she quickly covered with a smile. And my parents, they laughed at all the right moments, oblivious to what they were validating. I realized then, exposing him wouldn't be immediate. It wouldn't be a dramatic confrontation. It would be a dismantling from the inside out, quiet and precise. I started cataloging everything, dates, amounts, names, inconsistencies. Jordan helped, verifying numbers and uncovering connections Ethan thought no one could trace. The tension grew quietly, like a rope being pulled slowly, ready to snap. And I knew, when the right moment came, the walls he built so carefully would crumble. The question wasn't if he would fall. It was when. The first move wasn't dramatic. It didn't involve confrontation or threats. It was almost invisible. I began by reaching out discreetly to people Ethan had mentioned casually, clients, partners, investors. Names he dropped to impress my family, to validate his fabricated success. I asked simple, casual questions. How are things going with the project? Any updates from headquarters? The responses, or lack thereof, were telling. Many didn't exist. Some had never even met him. Meanwhile, Jordan and I dug deeper. We traced bank transactions, cross-referenced addresses, and examined filings. Every discrepancy added a new layer to the picture forming before me. His empire wasn't just shaky, it was entirely fabricated. I kept it hidden. At family dinners, I played the part of the quiet, unemployed sister. I laughed at his jokes, nodded at his stories, even complimented him when required. No one suspected I was gathering evidence. Every interaction became a calculated step. A conversation here, a question there. Each slip, each vague claim, was noted. And as I watched him bask in his false image, I felt a growing thrill. He thought he was untouchable, that the world was blind to his deceit. But I was patient. Strategic. Methodical. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to turn his lies into proof. The trap was no longer just a plan in my mind. It had begun. And I smiled quietly, knowing he wouldn't see the consequences coming. By now, my investigation was deeper than I ever imagined. Every lie Ethan told, every fabricated client or transaction, had a corresponding proof waiting to be revealed. But with each step forward, the risk grew. One careless message, one accidental comment in front of Sophie or my parents, could ruin everything I was building. I had to be invisible, even more than before. I became an observer of everything: Ethan's habits, his patterns, the way he shifted stories when challenged, the slight hesitations that betrayed his confidence. Jordan and I double-checked every piece of evidence, knowing that a single mistake could expose me instead of him. And the hardest part? Staying calm while watching him succeed in public. Every family gathering, every toast, every compliment he received from my parents and sister, it tested my patience. My own family validated him, laughed at his jokes, and dismissed me as inconsequential. At night, alone in my apartment, I questioned the plan. Was it too dangerous? Would they believe me when the truth came out, or would I be blamed for trying to ruin the perfect image? But I reminded myself, strategy is stronger than emotion. Vengeance isn't about acting, it's about timing. And I was still waiting. Still watching. Still building the moment where every lie he told would collapse in front of everyone. The closer I got, the more the tension tightened around us like a noose. One wrong move, and it could all unravel. But I couldn't stop now. The deeper I went, the more I realized I couldn't do this alone. Jordan could verify numbers and trace transactions, but he couldn't attend every family dinner or monitor every interaction. I had to keep appearances perfect, hiding my investigation behind the mask of the unemployed sister. It was exhausting. I gave up nights out with friends, casual conversations, even sleep sometimes, just to follow leads, cross-check statements, and make sure every piece of evidence was airtight. Every sacrifice weighed heavily, especially as I watched Ethan charm my family, flaunt his fabricated successes, and subtly belittle me in front of them. I missed being carefree. I missed simple moments with Sophie before she became blinded by admiration for him. And yet, I didn't complain, I didn't vent, I didn't let anger leak into my words or expressions. Each personal loss, each moment of isolation, was part of the plan. Every sacrifice built the foundation for the revelation that would expose him completely. Sometimes, I felt the loneliness creeping in, whispering doubts: what if I failed? What if no one believed me? But I pushed the thoughts aside. Strategy demanded clarity, not emotion. I wasn't seeking sympathy. I wasn't seeking approval. I was building something far more powerful, the undeniable truth. And soon, the world would have no choice but to see him for what he really was. The question wasn't about my sacrifices. It was whether he'd survive them. The day of Sophie and Ethan's wedding arrived, and everything looked perfect. Flowers, laughter, champagne, a picture of happiness that hid 1,000 lies. Everyone was smiling, toasting, celebrating, convinced that Ethan was the man they always believed him to be. I arrived calm, composed, unnoticed. My presence was ordinary. My smile polite. To the world, I was still the quiet, unemployed sister. But in my bag, tucked under a folder, lay months of painstaking work, bank statements, contracts, screenshots, and verified testimonies. Every lie, every fabricated claim, every fake client, documented, irrefutable. I watched Ethan move through the crowd, charming guests, basking in approval. He had no idea that his empire, carefully constructed over years, was about to collapse in a single moment. He believed himself untouchable because he relied on appearances, assumptions, and my family's blind trust. I approached him quietly, handed him the folder, and leaned close enough for only him to hear. "You should know who you married." And then I stepped back. No screaming. No confrontation. Just the folder and the truth inside it. For the first time, I saw a flicker of panic cross his face, the controlled, confident mask cracking. He realized, too late, that charm and lies couldn't protect him from strategy and patience. The room remained oblivious for a moment, but the first cracks were already forming. And I knew the moment of reckoning had begun. Ethan froze, the folder heavy in his hands, like it suddenly weighed more than all the confidence he'd carried for years. His smile vanished. The words he had practiced, the charm he had relied on, the stories he had woven, all of it evaporated in an instant. He tried to speak, tried to explain, tried to spin another tale, but the evidence was meticulous. Screenshots, bank statements, falsified contracts, all connected, all undeniable. His calm control slipped. Stammering replaced confidence. Panic replaced charm. Every guest who had admired him now watched a man unraveling in real time. Sophie's smile faltered. Confusion clouded her eyes as the reality of months of deception began to sink in. My parents, who had once laughed at me for being unemployed, now glanced at each other, unsure how to process the proof staring them in the face. And me? I stayed quiet. I didn't gloat. I didn't explain. I let him destroy himself. Every hesitation, every lie, every carefully constructed image, crashing down purely because it had been built on falsehoods. The best part? He couldn't blame anyone but himself. Every slip, every boast, every deceitful story had led him here. The room was silent. Not a cheer, not a confrontation, just the weight of truth settling like a stone. Ethan had been untouchable, until he wasn't. And I realized something profound: sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't loud, it's inevitable. I didn't speak. I didn't argue. I didn't try to explain the months of work, the sleepless nights, the painstaking research. Because there was nothing left to say. The folder had done the talking. Ethan trembled in front of everyone, his confidence shattered, his lies exposed, his empire collapsing in real time. Sophie's eyes were wide, the admiration replaced with shock and betrayal. My parents stared, conflicted, their carefully curated image of success crumbling silently in the back of their minds. But even in that moment, I understood them too well. They wouldn't truly see me. They wouldn't apologize. They wouldn't acknowledge the patience, intelligence, and courage it had taken to unravel the man they loved more than the truth. So I smiled, not at him, not at them, but at myself. I folded my hands, straightened my back, and walked away. Each step was deliberate, each movement calm, as if I were leaving behind not just a wedding hall, but a lifetime of invisibility, humiliation, and expectation. The laughter, the judgment, the dismissals, they were all behind me now. I didn't need closure from them. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need anyone to validate my worth. For the first time, I felt it clearly: I was free. And in that freedom, I realized the truth that had guided me all along: the greatest victory isn't seeing the villain fall. It's choosing yourself, leaving the game entirely, and never letting anyone define your value again. I stepped out of the hall, out of their world, and into mine. And finally, I was seen, not by them, but by myself. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to hit the like button. It lets me know you want more stories like this. I'd love to hear from you, so drop a comment below. Have you ever had to stay silent while someone underestimated you? And don't forget to subscribe for more intense, real-life stories of strategy, patience, and quiet victories. You won't want to miss what's coming next.